Now, a worldwide crisis impacting every one of us.
This is the biggest story of our time.
It is, actually, and it's happening right in front of our eyes.
Under our feet.
Yeah, right here.
Something is happening to the glaciers and ice sheets that store much of our fresh water.
So this is the real risk, seeing the land ice melt.
But where is all that water headed?
3, 2, drop, drop, drop. There goes one right there.
We take you on a NASA mission over these majestic canyons of pure ice and rock.
I'm the luckiest scientist in the world right now.
And underneath a glacier's hidden ice cave.
It's very magical spot.
A place less than 80 humans have ever been.
Iceberg, right ahead!
Ice is pouring into the ocean by the gigaton. You can barely hunt a polar bear these days.
Because the ice is no more.
But real solutions
This looks like what someone in the 70s thought the future would look like.
Yeah.
could come from here as well. We are taking you to Iceland, Greenland, and the land where you live.
We're from Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Go to Southeast Texas.
So you're basically evacuating and going somewhere to higher land.
Exactly. But I can't afford to keep going through this.
And now, from the Weather Channel Explorers, this is Meltdown. Just like you, I've spent years looking at videos and photos of glaciers. I thought I knew what they were. I assumed I understood the basics.
Have a pleasant stay here in Iceland.
But when I got to Iceland, that all changed.
In truth, most people on Earth will never stand on a glacier. They'll never see a glacier. They'll never be near one.
It's a 2.5-hour drive out to the Selema-Yurkut Glacier on the southern coast. It is 5 miles long, more than a mile wide. But even at that massive size, it's not even the biggest glacier in Iceland.
This is where the glacier used to be in 2010.
Glacier expert Gadi Sigurdsson took us out to what is now the closest entrance to the massive ice.
It recedes about 30 to 60 feet every year. So if we look behind us, it's gonna just move further back.
In the last decade or so,
So I see changes here every day.
it's melted back nearly 8 football fields.
Oh yeah, I've been here for the past 15 years. I've seen the whole thing moving out.
Today, we will be climbing Selema-Yurkut, built from thousands of years of snowfall compressed down by time and its own weight into the purest ice in the world.
It looks like it's dirt piles, but
Yeah, it's actually ice.
it's all ice right there.
That's not dirt, it's volcanic ash from nearby eruptions, the latest just a decade ago. You remember when the volcano blew up in Iceland, diverting worldwide air traffic? Well, that was here, the next volcano over.
We're seeing dramatic pieces falling off.
The blackness of the ash
This is the ash from the 2010 eruption. It's quite easily recognized.
is helping melt the glacier even faster than before.
So that's the sun up there. It's sending radiant energy all the way down to here.
Yes.
When it hits something dark, it absorbs that radiant energy
Yes.
and it starts all of this melting right here.
The blackness absorbs more heat than the white material.
So the darker the Arctic gets, the faster it melts.
Yes.
The faster it melts, the darker it gets.
Exactly.
It's just been accelerated by the volcano here.
So we're going to see faster changes.
Whoa! I don't even know what to say. That's impressive.
Told ya, I never truly understood the scale of it all until that moment. The only way to describe it is if you looked at the skyscrapers in some major city and they were all made of pure ice. The deep black, the crystal ice glistening like diamonds.
You don't need much climbing experience to do this.
No, I mean, I take people that have never walked on a glacier before and they come hiking up with me here every day.
Even 6-year-olds have been out here with Gadi as tourism has become the #1 industry in Iceland.
Come out and experience nature and actually interact with it like we're doing right now. We're walking on a glacier.
So it doesn't hurt the glacier to walk on it?
By walking on it, we're not damaging it.
Gadi's industry has become a get-it-while-it-lasts type of adventure
It's an experience you will never forget.
that's creating an economic boom in the middle of this meltdown.
This is all going to be gone?
This is all going to be gone.
Just like when you're on an icy sidewalk, slipping is a real danger here. But there's magic in these metal-toothed boot coverings called crampons.
They work like superpowers, give you the superpower to walk on ice.
Yeah.
And then you can cruise along the glacier and experience it.
The glaciers are melting from the top down, heated by the sun, but they're also melting from the inside out. Cut away by these ice water tunnels called moulins.
And as the glacier melts, these openings get open to us and actually create a hollow space inside the ice where the water used to travel.
There's also a third way they melt, but we'll get to that later. Right now, it's time to focus on getting these ice screws secured. Gotti is about to teach me how to climb a glacier wall using ropes and ice axes.
But to get a little bit more swing, you're going to swing your hands up.
Remember, short steps with the feet, and it's good to take a look at your feet when you're kicking them in to see how they are. Yeah, good. Then you go for the next one.
Unlike rock climbing, there is nothing to place your feet on. You have to dig your axe into the ice, pull yourself up, wiggle it out, and then dig it in again as you make your way up to the deepest ridge on the glacier.
This year, it's a feature that's been here for at least 10 years.
How long until this is in the ocean?
This will probably be gone, most of it probably in 1 or 2 years. Like this whole hole is
the whole thing.
The whole thing.
This whole majestic canyon.
Yeah.
This humbles you looking at this.
It does. I mean, it makes you feel pretty small.
It's true, glaciers have always melted.
So it is normal for the Earth to go up and down in temperature, but we've never seen the temperature rising so fast.
What's changed is the speed of the melt. To follow the water today, you have to get in your car and drive for 6 miles.
The glacier used to reach down here in the 1900s, and ever since it's been receding up to the position where we were before. But this is where the glacier water ends up in the North Atlantic Ocean.
The water that spills out here makes sea levels rise 7,000 miles south in Cape Town, South Africa. But 80 miles north of us at the exact same time, this group was hiking to another glacier, but they did not find it there.
It is the first recognized, named major glacier in Iceland to be lost to climate change.
Rice University researcher Dr. Simone Howell tells us what's known as the OK Glacier has all but melted away.
Yeah, the OK Glacier is gone.
This is the OK Glacier in 1986 as seen from a NASA satellite. And this is the same glacier just 33 years later in 2019.
It's not a glacier anymore.
Sometimes it's difficult for people to kind of get their head around the science. Maybe people feel controversial about it, but this is a way of having a different kind of emotional connection to the loss of these beautiful ice forms that are being lost.
If the Arctic stays this warm, scientists believe all the ice in Iceland is now at risk.
We have to get used to Iceland without glaciers.
What will you call it?
Well, we probably have to find a new name, like Windland or something like that.
Meltland.
Meltland, or Niceland, I would like that.
Niceland.
Niceland.
Before it comes to that, tourists Weston and Jamie have come to this glacier from Fayetteville, Arkansas.
The melt that we've read about and heard about is part of the reason that we booked this trip. There is a little sense of urgency of wanting to experience something like this.
That was surprising to me. I wasn't expecting to see running water.
But that's nothing compared to the meltdown next door in Greenland, where in the summer of 2019, 12.5 billion tons of ice melted into the ocean, all in one day.
On behalf of Air Iceland Connect, we hope you have enjoyed the flight. Thank you and have a good day.
It's a quick 2-hour flight from Iceland to Greenland's Kulasuk Island on the east coast. As we landed, there were icebergs in the ocean. Get a little closer, and you can actually touch the climate crisis.
Oh, look at that. Oh, yay!
The sheer amount of icebergs melting into the ocean is unprecedented. Just days before our trip, enough cracked and melted off of Greenland's ice sheet to fill 5 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's not the total summer meltdown, no. All of that ice melted in one day, August 1st, 2019. We are here boating past the icebergs and at least 7 whales to find out what's really going on.
Greenland's been on Jenny Craig. Every year, Greenland loses more ice than it gains in snow.
That's Dr. Josh Willis from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's his DC-3 research plane. These glacier hunters are on a mission called Oceans Melting Greenland.
Or OMG for short.
We'll be flying over and basically a giant canyon carved out by an ancient glacier.
The water around Greenland is a layer cake.
Greenland's melting because the air is warming, but it's also melting because the ocean is warming.
You see, there's cold, fresh water on top. Those are melted icebergs that crack off from the glaciers, and another layer of warm water deep underneath. Literally, tropical water that somehow finds its way up here following ocean currents, staying just warm enough to cause chaos.
When it hits the glaciers at depth, it melts them like crazy.
Ironically, the best way to explore the deep subarctic waters is to fly over it, dropping probes out of this tube.
Don't let it suck your camera out.
They sink to the bottom, measuring how warm and salty the water is at every level.
It still stays warm when it gets here. That's right, warm water, plenty warm enough to melt a whole lot of ice.
I gotta tell you, this is one of the most breathtaking, awe-inspiring things I've ever seen, flying just about 700 feet above the surface. Watch as the shadow of the plane just rolls over these icebergs. And remember, you're only seeing the tip of each one. Most of it lies underwater. Even the tiny ones weigh at least 1,000 tons.
We're gonna drop a probe right there, and then we're gonna start flying out right along the canyon, dropping probes as we go, all the way into the ocean.
You're saying it's surprising, it's warm water at depth, but it's actually really salty, so that's why it's dense and staying down there.
Dr. David Holland's team is here,
Number 2.
taking a slightly different look at the same problem. He had a theory that warming oceans were melting Greenland, and to prove it, the New York University professor chartered Greenlandic helicopters, started drilling monitors into the ice.
We had been modeling decades ago how oceans interact with glaciers.
This is the mooring. It's we call it the M&M because it looks like a giant M&M candy.
His team of researchers have converted an old icebreaker into their research ship.
The planet has the tropical regions and the polar. The polar makes cold, fresh water, and the tropics make warm, salty water. And when they meet, it's just empirical. They're very salty. They sink under the polar waters, and the polar waters carry on.
They drop these big UFO-looking probes into the icy water that sit on the bottom for a long time. Eventually, they'll come back and fish them out of there, hoping to prove what's going on here.
You actually have to physically put a sensor into the ocean.
And at the bottom of the ocean is where the NYU probes stay. The NASA probes are dropped from this plane.
Is it true that the water actually gets warmer as you go down?
Most of the time, that's what I've seen.
Why? Well, science says without a doubt greenhouse gases have been building up since the industrial age started burning fossil fuels. Most of the warming that's going on happens out at sea. Here's a look at the ocean heat increasing just since 1993, warming at the surface and down deep.
Sunlight gets in, heat doesn't get back out. So we're literally trapping it just like a greenhouse.
We're flying to the south right now. We're coming along this pink line.
There goes one of those probes right now, one of at least 250 around Greenland. It hits the surface and starts transmitting.
3, 2, drop, drop, drop. Each one of these probes, and there goes one right there, gives us a better understanding of how the meltdown here affects us back home.
In Hampton Roads, Virginia, for example, sea levels are up 14 inches in the past 90 years. That comes from this U.S. military report that says the effects of a changing climate are a national security issue. Sea ice from the North Pole will never cause oceans to rise. It's already in the water, just like the ice melting in your glass will never make it overflow. But it's the land-based ice breaking off of Greenland, creating these icebergs melting into the ocean that's causing the problem. We're adding more ice to the glass.
That's nothing new, but what's happening is the pieces that are breaking off are getting bigger, and they're breaking off faster and faster, more quickly than the snow can replenish it on the surface of the ice sheet.
It's losing far more than it's gaining.
Just to make sure it's freshwater ice floating in the salty ocean, you can reach out, grab a piece, and taste it.
It's a little bit salty because of the ocean, but it's also very, very fresh water. This is from the glacier back there.
It is fresh water melting into the ocean at a faster rate than history has ever recorded. The Arctic keeps its own receipts. Bubbles of ancient air are trapped inside these glaciers, but you need to know the secret entrance to get underneath.
This cave so far has been seen by 72 people ever.
And later, how sea level rise is already changing American lives.
Where will you go? Further north somewhere. But it won't be in a low-lying area.
Plus, our first look at a new technology
It's a carbon scrubber for ambient air
that could help solve big problems as the planet continues to melt down. This is Greenland, the largest island in the world. We have come out to a bay filled with icebergs because the value of this place is measured in gigatons of ice. A massive ice sheet that's 3 times the size of Texas covers Greenland. We are walking across the Abusiai Glacier.
The glacier ice is formed from pressure of snow over time.
In recent years, Greenland has melted off more than it's gained in snowfall. These glaciers are disappearing fast. More than 4 trillion tons gone in the last 15 years.
5 years ago, the glacier was roughly here, where we are now.
Walk a little closer, and you'll see how rapidly it's melting down.
So the glacier was touching the first rock.
How long ago? Years ago or days ago?
No, yeah, was days. Was just 11 days ago.
11 days ago you put this here?
So it's a couple of meters. This is the edge.
We asked glacier expert Nico Segreto to take us here so we could witness it up close. Trapped by greenhouse gases, the sun is melting Greenland from above, and warmer than normal ocean water is melting it from underneath.
Just last year, we were walking 5 meters higher than now.
Think about that. In 1 year, a chunk of ice more than 16 feet thick, extending as far as the eye can see, simply slid into the ocean.
So that's 100 meters down there?
That chunk was full of these holes. All that's left are piles of dust.
The dust is at the bottom of this hole.
So this was at the bottom of one of those holes a year ago?
Yeah.
The glacier isn't just melting out, it's also melting down. You see, this is the top of the glacier right here today. But just 1 year ago, the top was all the way up there where Nico's waving his arms. That is 20 feet of vertical loss in just 12 months. This is the most unstable part of the cave here.
Exactly, yeah.
Nico took us into the ice cave he discovered just months ago.
It's a very magical spot to me.
We're actually able to walk underneath it as it rains on top of us from ancient snowflakes melting.
That's it.
What melts in Greenland affects the entire world. It's melting fast enough to raise worldwide sea levels by almost 1 millimeter every year. That may not sound like much, but remember, that's just the Greenland melt, just 1 year.
We can literally take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and weigh it, literally measure its isotopic ratios, and we can tell that it comes from burning fossil fuels. So we know the CO2 in the air comes from us.
So how is it that scientists know what the carbon content of the air is today versus tens of thousands of years ago? Well, the answer is right here. You see those little tiny veins in there with those bubbles moving around? That is trapped ancient atmosphere in there.
It's been squeezed so much, right? We are at the bottom of the glacier where the biggest pressure is and the oldest ice is. So we're talking tens of thousands of years old. This cave so far has been seen by 72 people ever.
So is this light filtered from the sun above?
So the roof right now, it can be about 30 feet.
30 feet of ice between us and the sunlight, and it's still getting through.
Yeah, as we would go more, it gets just less light because of that. It gets too thick for the light to filter.
We've seen what the glacier has lost in a year, but 40 years ago, Abu Siai was as high as that mountaintop.
40 years ago, as my neighbor told me, the glacier was as far as the boat is. So imagine the amount of water that it's today in the ocean.
It's all gone now, lost to small drips and giant calving events like this, where an entire section of the nearby Helheim Glacier cracked off all at once. It is very rare to witness something like this. This chunk is the size of Lower Manhattan, and we tracked down the person who caught it on camera.
It's scary. It was scary.
Every time a glacier crumbles in Greenland, it turns into icebergs. Those icebergs melt and the water has to go somewhere. It's simple math. This plus this amplifies this kind of massive flooding on the coasts of our country. It all starts at the top of the planet in the middle of an epic meltdown. It's difficult to understand what you're looking at here. This is Greenland's 4-mile-wide Helheim Glacier, named for the Viking world of the dead, and it's collapsing. It is very rare for a human to witness something like this, unprecedented, to capture it all on video.
But to be able to visually see it, it's quite stunning.
Arctic researcher Denise Holland is the reason why we have a visual record of this colossal meltdown called a calving event. During 30 thunderous minutes in the summer of 2018, a chunk that's the size of Lower Manhattan crumbled into the sea.
So when we think about the size of it, we say from Battery Park to Central Park.
This is Greenland, down there on the southeast coast. That is Helheim. Over the last 20 years, NASA's laser scanning planes have seen Helheim rapidly retreat, partially recover, and crumble again. Denise Holland and her husband,
my name is David Holland, professor of math at New York University,
have been in and out of here for years running mathematical experiments on the glaciers.
I was just about to get ready to go to bed, and I heard this sort of sustained noise that was like thunder, a loud roar, and I turned to David and I said, I think something's about to happen. And it just so happened then that this huge chunk of ice started to peel off the calving front. It was about 10 gigatons of ice came off.
That's 10 billion tons. Even 1 gigaton is nearly unimaginable. It's an ice cube 4 times as high as the Washington Monument, extending from the Lincoln Memorial to the Capitol steps. This one event involved 10 times that amount of ice.
It was scary. It was scary.
In the past 15 years, Greenland has lost 4 trillion tons of ice, raising global sea levels by about a half an inch. In most places, that's enough to erase about 4 feet of beach. But here in Greenland, the sea level isn't rising, it's actually dropping, because that amount of ice loss is enough to change the world's gravity.
These are NASA's GRACE satellites, nicknamed Tom and Jerry because they chase each other around the Earth.
Everything that has mass has gravity, and there's a force associated with anything that's heavy.
When they cross over something heavy, the distance changes between the satellites.
And by measuring the distance between them very accurately, we can figure out the weight of whatever it is they're flying over.
2008, 2009, 2010, Greenland's weight keeps dropping. Its gravitational pull is becoming less and less every year. Let's explain it this way. Greenland is still heavy enough to create its own gravity, pulling the ocean in towards the island. But as that heavy ice melts away, Greenland doesn't just lose water, it loses its gravitational pulling power as well.
If you melt the ice sheet here, sea level drops. because the gravity field's gone. But the rest of the world gets a lot of water and goes up.
You may be surprised where he means by the rest of the world. This is southeast Texas.
I've never seen the water this deep in 39 years.
One after the other, devastating floods have hit the area around Beaumont. There was Hurricane Harvey in 2017 and Tropical Storm Melda in 2019.
Everybody had just got back into their homes, you know, not long ago, and now they've lost everything again.
According to NOAA data, relative sea level rise in this area is up around 18 inches in the past 60 to 70 years. The Texas coast is sinking as the sea is rising, making these kinds of floods worse here in deep red oil country.
People who experience these events are actually more inclined to recognize that climate change is happening.
Houston-based professor Dr. Simone Howell has spent her life decoding how these events in the Arctic affect real people.
And actually, I would argue that it is first and foremost a social issue.
Come on, Josh.
Is there anybody who's thinking about moving out because of this?
Oh, I'm done. I'm not moving back in.
You're not?
I'm not rebuilding.
When did you make that decision?
When this come in. I mean, this will be the second time I'd rebuilt in 2 years.
Yeah, same thing. I ain't rebuilding. It's going to be done.
Brothers Josh and Jerome Reinders aren't the only Texans who told me they are now moving out after this flood. Now, of course, there are a ton of issues that caused this, but higher sea levels don't help. So in the U.S., there's a lot of people who will see this and say, that's something that I've heard is not actually happening.
Climate change.
Yes.
Do hurricanes and tropical storms seem like they're getting stronger?
They are. They are. You know, I mean, I don't know why, but it's just Mother Nature. Can't do nothing about it.
It's a sure sign that we are experiencing a different kind of climate.
There are certainly mixed opinions here in Texas.
So you're staying?
Yes, sir.
You won't go?
I will not.
Despite other people leaving?
Yep.
Yet after this, neighborhood discussions are changing.
Yeah, basically they're just talking about the climate change. We're getting the amount of water we're getting dropped on us in the amount of time. There's no drainage system that actually can handle that.
So you're basically evacuating and going somewhere to higher land.
Exactly.
You're one of millions who might make that choice.
Exactly.
By 2050, it could be 25 million people displaced, having to leave their homes worldwide. That's an estimate from the International Organization for Migration. On the high end, they say it could be 1.5 billion people.
That's also something that people don't think about when they think about sea level rise. People have to go somewhere, they have to move somewhere.
As for sea level rise, the latest 2019 report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns global sea levels could climb by more than 3 feet by 2100.
Even 1 foot of sea level rise would have devastating consequences for many people in the United States living near the seashore.
People don't want to give bad news.
In South Florida, around Miami, insurance companies are already starting to use sea level rise prediction maps.
But at least you can prepare yourself to minimize the damage.
As the seas are rising, you have more erosion that's gonna take away the beaches.
This is not just happening in the future or way out in Southeast Asia or somewhere. This is a today problem. It's changing landscapes, populations, and minds here and now.
As these dramatic weather events continue and as people start to experience sea level rise, for example, or extreme heat, we will also start to see more political consensus, more social consensus.
I don't want to leave my parents, but I can't afford to keep going through this.
We are all part of one ocean. Remember Hurricane Chris and Hurricane Oscar back in 2018? It's okay if you don't. These storms went out to sea. Or did they?
Like, no, we don't have to worry about them anymore. They're going out to the ocean. Oh, they're going somewhere up north. Yeah, that's to us.
Some hurricanes wind up delivering snowfall that compacts into new glaciers in Greenland and Iceland.
This ice right here is directly connected to hurricanes and tropical storms.
Greenland is definitely losing ice. We can measure this from space.
2019 may end up being a record year for Greenlandic ice loss. Between summer 18 and summer 19, more icy water rushed into the ocean than all of the water the entire United States uses in a typical 9-month period. The faucet is on. Big changes are already happening right here, and it's starting with these sled dogs. We'll explain after this. These glaciers are now in full meltdown, causing sea levels to rise along U.S. coastlines. There's also an impact here in Greenland, where 4,000 years ago, the first Paleo-Eskimo dog teams were already helping humans survive the harsh Arctic winter months. These days, those dog teams are becoming an echo of what they used to be.
Because the ice is no more.
Justus Poulsen is the unofficial mayor of Kulisuk on the southeast coast. Just days ago, his newest sled dogs were born into this harsh world.
4 or 5 days maybe. The dog is important for me.
Those dogs stay outside even as puppies. We're told it conditions their growing bodies to the environment.
We have a winter from November.
And the wintry weather with its ice and snow sticks around for months. It is not uncommon to have snow here in August, but
this year, it's first time in my life we got so early summer.
Justus tells us the snow has now started disappearing in May.
Winter is shorter. Summer is longer.
For thousands of years, dogs have been vital to surviving in Greenland, where you eat what you can catch: seal, whale.
You eat many things, but for me, it's polar bears is best.
When they do kill a big polar bear like this one animal will feed the entire community for months, but actually getting one is tricky. The easiest way to do it is to take your dog sled and go out on the ice. But if the ice is water, then you're gonna have to use a boat. And boat fuel is 3 times more expensive than feeding your dogs. Some Greenlanders say they can no longer afford to keep the dogs around these days. The people and dogs who call Greenland home have generational roots in this frozen soil. Oh, they're all up on the hill.
Yeah. It's difficult in this time, me not driving the dog sled.
The melt-off is happening so fast there's no obvious roadmap forward. We crossed the bay in a small motorboat and found a larger city adapting to this global change. This is Tasiilaq, the cultural and economic capital of eastern Greenland. South of here, you may see new places to farm because the land is available now. Here, there could be a different kind of economic boom. So you're the harbor master here.
Yeah.
Paul Sorensen has 8 to 10 workers who spend all winter looking for other jobs.
They don't work all year round.
They're seasonal workers.
Seasonal work, yeah. So the season will be lengthened.
If the ocean is open longer, his business can stay open longer.
The recent years has brought less ice from the North Pole, so it should be possible.
Paul tells us maritime insurance rules would have to change, but it is now physically possible to keep the port open in the months that have been traditionally frozen over. North of us, Canadian shipping routes called the Northwest Passage are starting to open as well. So if there's a shorter winter here and more ships can come in, you can actually employ more people.
Yeah, a lot more. We have a long winter where we wait for the work to come.
Looks like that work may be coming for the people of Tasiilaq. These are the faces of this newer, warmer Greenland, getting greener in more ways than one.
Is it possible that in this area of the world, not the rest of the world, but this area, that these changes could be good for your economy?
Yeah.
As the Arctic melts further and further, there are certain opportunities to be had, economic opportunities.
And it's not just the dock workers and their families here in Greenland. We are on our way back to Iceland because there's something I just could not leave without seeing for myself. A possible breakthrough in the power plant industry that could stop carbon at its source.
We're standing right next to an active volcano, and this is an open well that goes all the way down to the subsurface. The heat that's right below us, I can smell the sulfur in the air. There are 60 of these wells here on site at this power plant. This right here is volcano power.
There's a meltdown the people of this world have never seen before. Greenland's glaciers are melting at an average of 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools into the ocean, not per day, per second. That's 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water into the sea every second now. The air is warmer, the water is warmer, and the melting is getting faster. In May of 2019, a UC San Diego carbon monitor located on this mountaintop in Hawaii recorded something troubling. The carbon content of the atmosphere had reached 415 parts per million. Now, since NOAA considers Mauna Loa to be an average for the Earth's northern hemisphere, it's remarkable to note.
In the history of humanity, we have never lived in conditions with that much carbon dioxide in our atmosphere.
Remember that ice cave with bubbles of trapped air?
So how long do you think it's been since this rock has been exposed?
Hundreds of thousands of years.
Well, what's known as ice core data is how scientists can confirm ancient CO2 content going back 800,000 years. Here's the Industrial Revolution, here's World War II, and CO2 levels just keep on rising as we continue to pump more carbon into the atmosphere through fossil fuel power plants, industrial agriculture, air travel, even ways you think of as clean technologies.
Iceland uses geothermal to create electricity. They also use hydropower.
Clean, renewable geothermal power, but it's not necessarily 100% carbon-free. Volcanic activity bubbling just beneath the surface shows the contrast here: fire and ice. Here on this rapidly melting glacier, we learned how people in Iceland use that volcano power.
That's what generates electricity for us to make hot water, take a shower, cook our dinner, turn on our iPhone, and check out the Weather Channel.
We are on our way to Iceland's largest geothermal power plant to better understand this clean technology, what it can do and what it cannot do.
Take the steam through the turbines, generate the electricity.
Reykjavik Energy's Dr. Edda Arasdottir told me 0.5% of what they're bringing up from underneath can be considered greenhouse gases, mostly carbon dioxide.
It's not originating from burning fossil fuel though, it is coming from the magma beneath us.
This is natural carbon dioxide.
Yes, it is.
While many power plants burn coal or gas or use nuclear fission to create steam, here they've already got the steam to begin with.
So this is basically, here we are cooling the steam.
You're making your own rainstorm.
Yeah.
But carbon is still escaping, for now.
This looks like what someone in the 70s thought the future would look like.
Yeah, we get that a lot, that it's sort of Martian vibe here.
Under these domes, there is a brand new way to capture power plant carbon, push it down into the earth, and turn it into solid rock.
So to explain the process, it's better to see for yourself.
Yeah, so that's it. Those white specks, that's the carbon.
First, they mix the CO2 and other gases with water, making a kind of soda water that they pump 1.25 miles below the plant at high pressure.
So through here, we have the water flowing that contains the captured CO2 and H2S, which we dissolved in water.
Why don't we see any bubbles?
Because the pressure is maintained high enough that we don't see bubbles. We don't want bubbles.
That soda water type liquid dissolves a common kind of underground basaltic rock and eventually turns solid again. There's no way to crack this open and have gas come out of here. This is just rock.
Rock is just rock. It doesn't escape, you know, so yeah.
In simple terms, they pump the liquid carbon deep into the ground where it becomes rock forever. The power company's goal is to turn all the carbon they produce into 30,000 tons of rock per year.
Once it's stone, you don't have to think about it.
And they're already expanding to Turkey, Italy, Germany, and working with US researchers.
It is our responsibility, the wealthier nations, the more advanced nations, to lead the way and use all the solutions that are available today to reduce our carbon footprint.
And one more thing, at the far end of their property, we found this fan whirring away.
It's a carbon scrubber for ambient air.
They have the same thing on the space station. Dirty air in, cleaner air out. So there's no more carbon coming out of here.
Well, there is some.
Just a little bit.
100 ppm or something like that.
Parts per million.
Yeah, I know.
It's nothing. This kind of scrubbing isn't enough to stop these glaciers from melting away, but it's a start.
And this is something that we can do. We just have to change our behavior a little bit and just be open to new things.
You know, maybe not every place can heat its houses with geothermal, but we have places in the desert that can create solar. We have the wind in West Texas, for example, that's incredibly productive.
Are we past a point now where we can fix this problem?
No, we're not past the point, but we are getting closer to the tipping point.
So let's forget the problem that we're raising the temperatures and think about that the temperatures are rising.
It kind of reminds us to be more respectful of the place that we live.
Look, I get it. It's nearly impossible to decouple climate change from politics. So forget about the politics for a second. Forget about the word climate change. Think of this as just a water distribution problem. We have the world's largest freezer that I'm standing on right here, and it is melting away right out into the ocean. That's where the sea level rise comes from. This meltdown is gonna affect us all. In Iceland, I'm Dave Malkoff. Thanks for joining us.